Question for you. Which comes first, the chicken or the egg? Now, this riddle feels like a bit of a conundrum, and it isn't something we need to talk about here. But there's a similar tension that we could frame as a conundrum in business, and that is customer first or employee first. That is the question we will wrestle with today, and our guest has an answer. Welcome to another episode of the Remarkable Leadership Podcast, where we are helping leaders grow personally and professionally to lead more effectively and make a bigger positive difference for their teams, organizations, and the world. If you are listening to this podcast, you could be with us in the future live on your favorite social media channel. Well, unless I suppose that channel is Discord or TikTok, because we're not there. But listen, you can join us in the future and get this information sooner and have more interaction with my guest. And you can do all that by finding out when they're happening. And the way to do that is to join our Facebook or LinkedIn groups. You can just go to remarkablepodcast.com/Facebook or remarkablepodcast.com/LinkedIn to get connected there, and you'll know when these are going to happen, and then you can join us live. Hope you'll do that. Today's episode is brought to you by my latest book, Flexible Leadership: Navigate Uncertainty and Lead with Confidence. It's time to realize that styles can get in our way and that following our strengths might not always be the best approach. In a world that is more complex and uncertain than ever, leaders need a new perspective and a set of tools to create great results for their organizations and team members. That's what Flexible Leadership provides you and why I wrote it. You can learn more and order your copy now at remarkablepodcast.com/flexible. Seems like a logical link. And with that, let me bring in my guest. There he is. We had the chance to chat for a few minutes before we went live, and you're going to love this conversation. His name is Stephan Meier. He is the James P. Gorman Professor of Business Strategy at Columbia Business School and the Chair of the Management Division. He's the author of a new book, his first, The Employee Advantage: How Putting Workers First Helps Business Thrive. He is an award-winning teacher of classes in the MBA and EMBA program in executive education on strategy, the future of work, and behavioral economics. We're going to come back to that behavioral economics part in a second. He previously was a senior economist at the Federal Reserve Bank in Boston. His work has been published in leading academic journals, including the American Economic Review, Management Science, Psychological Science, Science Magazine, and has been profiled by the press in places like The Economist, the Wall Street Journal, the Financial Times, the New York Times, all sorts of other places. He has a PhD in economics from the University of Zurich, and he is my guest, and I'm glad to have you. Stephan, thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, Kevin. That was a way too nice introduction, I think.
Well, your mother wrote it, so here we go.
Exactly.
I always feel like when someone introduces me, I'm like, man, that sounded, I don't know. But then I realized that we probably sent it to him. So anyway, I'm so glad that you're here. I'm looking forward to this conversation, but I'd really like to start here. When you were a kid, you didn't probably think you were be a behavioral economist. Like just a little bit about the journey that leads you to this kind of work, and then sort of what leads to the book.
Thank you so much, Kevin. No, I did not want to be a behavioral economist when I was a kid. I actually wanted to be a bus driver because I thought that the chair is really cool. It's really bouncy. I really enjoyed that. And then I wanted to be an astronaut.
See, that's what I usually get. People that's of roughly our age, they want to be an astronaut. I've never.
Yeah, I was obsessed with the space shuttle program, and I saw the first launch of the space shuttle, so that kind of you can maybe backward engineer how young I cannot be.
I'll tell you what. The only thing I'm going to say about that is that means I'm older because I have an earlier memory of the space program. We'll just let that go.
Oh, okay. So then I actually started to study history. Interesting enough. So I have a master in history. I grew up in Switzerland. I studied in Switzerland, and I studied history. In fact, I studied a lot of U.S. diplomatic history. Back when I studied it, the Eisenhower era, some of the documents were declassified, so it was interesting to look at them. So I studied a lot about Ike. And then while I was studying, I figured out like actually I want to have a little bit more frameworks, guidance in how people behave. And history, or at least how it was taught in Zurich, didn't give me that. So I switched to economics, which has a really, really strong view of how people behave. They are perfectly rational, they calculate optimally, and they optimize their self-interest. And that was interesting, but then I figured out pretty soon that definitely doesn't reflect how I behave, because I'm definitely not rational a lot of the
It's,
times.
it's a yes and, right? That's
Yeah,
true, but it's not
yes,
only true, right?
exactly. I mean, it's probably better to assume that people are just randomizing, assuming that they kind of think, yeah, what are the cost and benefit? And it's probably better to assume that not everybody is Mother Teresa and is completely selfless, but it's definitely not, as you said, exactly true. And so then I studied more and more about like how people actually behave, how they help each other. My PhD was about non-selfish behavior, the economics of non-selfish behavior. And then I came to the US for 9 months. That was the plan. I was at the Kennedy School in Harvard with a scholarship from Switzerland, and wanted to go back after 9 months. And that was in 2005. I'm still here. I then joined the Federal Reserve Bank in Boston. They just started a center on behavioral economics and decision making. That was kind of when behavioral economics really took off. So the Federal Reserve Bank thought like, well, we should need to know a little more about like how people actually make behavior. Can we make our models better and so forth? And so I worked there for a couple of years, and then I joined Columbia, the business school in 2008 as an assistant professor, and now I worked my way through here. Now, the book, how it came to my book.
Yeah, and the reason that I kind of wanted you to say more. I mean, I often ask that question,
Mhm.
Stephan, but I think the behavioral economics piece of this is useful because this is a book about putting employees first, right? The title of this podcast, how putting people first helps business thrive. Okay, cool. Most people would probably assume that the author is like a psychologist, was at Penn and positive psychology, and maybe there's like some employee engagement stuff in here, and which there is. But my point is the perspective that you come at this from is probably not what people were expecting or might expect, even when they pick up the book or are listening to us. And
Mhm.
so now with me giving that
Yeah.
preamble, tell us a little bit more about the book, then we're going to really dive
Yeah.
in. Okay?
Perfect. I mean, I yes, thanks. So I tried to describe it as like it's in the intersection of business strategy, behavioral economics, and the future of work. So I come through it from I teach at Columbia our students for years, thousands of students about like business strategy, how Walmart can do better. What's the problem with Disney? Whether PepsiCo should get rid of their snacks division, and so on and so forth. And for the longest time, I taught it by like just thinking about customers. We would start like in the intro lecture. I would say, well, there's like the success of a business depends on the customers and the competitors and the employees. And let's now think about the customers. And then the whole class was about the customers. And in my research, I would do understand like how do people work? Why are they motivated? And I did not combine it for the longest time. I kept it very separate, actually, and only the after the pandemic, I realized something is really broken in how we engage with our workforce, and I'm at fault. I'm teaching all those future leaders about business, and it's all about customers. While I know a lot actually about how humans behave, and that's the behavioral aspect to it, how humans actually make decisions, why they work, why they get up in the morning, and how that can actually help businesses to be successful. And so that's when I started to combining it. Now, technology obviously plays a role. I then started to teach about the future of work. throughout the book, I also want to say, I think enough of like, how technology can now help. So that's kind of the third part. So there's business strategy, which is pretty much economic, like how in competition can we beat the others and whatever. And then there is a part about behavioral economics, which is like, how do people actually how do they actually work? What motivates them? And the behavioral part is, but it's not just money. It's much more than just like the paycheck. And then there is kind of the future of work aspect. So what can we now do with technology in order to make that better?
I, you wrote something early in the book, and I don't remember the ratio. I'm going to say a number and it'll be wrong, but you said that something like 70% of the writing and 70% of the teaching about business is about 70 or 80% is about the customer versus the employee. And I may have the numbers wrong, but I'm right directionally.
Mm-hmm.
And so now I want you to give us the business case of why we need to not only think about the customer, but we need to think about our team,
Yeah.
our teams, our folks, our people.
Right, absolutely. So it's about, your ballpark, completely right about the ratio. So I'm actually got a little obsessed for a while, like looking, how often do executives talk about customers and employees? 10 times more on average. How do they talk about customers? Well, the customers are like growth and opportunities, and the employees are like risk and cost and like all those like painful stuff. And it's everywhere. It's like board member backgrounds, strategy books, research on strategy, and so on and so forth. So what's the case for business case for employees? I think there is one is just like what engaged employees give us, and then there is the other why I believe it's becoming more important and not less going forward. So the benefit of like having really engaged, motivated employees is, productivity goes up. People are working harder and better doing so. They're more innovative. They come up with new ideas much more than when they are checked out.
Or they
I
share
mean,
them. They might be coming
yeah,
up with them, but they're not
exactly.
sharing them. So what's the point, right?
Absolutely, Kevin. Like they actually share them because they care about the organization as well. They leave less. Quit rates are going down, turnover is going down, and if they have connections with customers, there is I don't believe there is any business where like you can have happy customers without happy employees. So the customer service and whatever directly depends on how engaged and motivated the workforce is.
I would even
And
add
yeah,
that at the end of the day, people don't buy from companies; they buy from people. So it's not just customer service; it's also sales, in my opinion.
yeah,
So
absolutely.
we could make that tie more than just anecdotally.
Yeah, no, I could not agree more. And like if companies that I talk about, like Costco, like the people, they treat their employees well. They give them clear career paths, so people actually come in and know how they can make a career. And as a result, the customer is super happy. Now, what does it get you with a happy customer? Well, sales per square foot goes up. In Costco, they're so loyal, that they pay subscription fees. They're so loyal that they love the private label. They love the Kirkland, which the margins are higher.
You're talking
And
about me. My wife and I go to Costco on a date. What are you talking about?
And so you kind of see just with Costco, like almost all the benefits that help businesses. And the CEO of Costco just recently before Congress, said it well. It's like, this is not altruism. This is good business because it gives us a competitive advantage.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I actually think it's more, the experience than the employees have is actually becoming more important and not less going forward. We
I
talk.
want to talk more
Yeah.
about that in a
Okay.
second.
Sure.
I want to go on. I want to kind of keep on this tension between customer and employee just for a second, and I want to go back to uh, a book that was famous a long time ago, co-written by a guy named Tom Peters, who I was thankful to have on the show twice.
Mhm.
But he and Bob Waterman made Stu Leonard famous for the sign that two rules: the customer is always right, and number two, if you don't think number rule is right, I mean, refer to number one, right? So like the customer is always right. So are you saying then here, if we're going to be like all putting our focus on the employee and the employee experience, are we saying then that employees are always right?
No. Well,
Okay,
first
I
of
knew
all,
the answer because I've read the
yes,
book, but
yes.
I wanted us to talk about it. So say
So,
more
so,
about that.
so first of all, I actually don't think it's even right that the customer is always right.
I would agree with you,
The,
but this
the,
was the
the,
best way to frame the question, right?
yes, no, absolutely. I mean, and you hear that all the time. The customer, and I think maybe at best the right customers might be always right. But with the employees, there is obviously too much of like, what we want to achieve is, that's why I try to be a little careful with like happy employees, because when your objective is to make people happy, employees just happy, send them to the beach in Florida, like they should on vacation, and like, but what you want is really engaged and motivated employees. That means we have to make like clear choices about that. In the book I talk about Etsy as an example. In that chapter, Etsy was like the most um, employee friendly organization, the best food, the amazing cafeteria, pottery classes and yoga classes and reading rooms, and like, you name it. It was amazing. The only problem, they lost like $30 million a year. And so the new CEO comes in and say like, look, we can't continue that. I want to be employee centric, but this went too far. And he had to make quite dramatic cuts at the beginning, and the some of those lavish programs didn't continue. Is still a very employee centric organization, but much more aligned with what the strategy actually is. In Etsy, a big part of what Etsy does is like help small, in the artisan. Turns out a lot of those artisans are female, for example, and they're like the little guy, like who sell whatever their pottery and like fight against like the Chinese imports and so on and so forth. So diversity and kind of helping those small, sometimes not as well organized consumers consumer like the producers is very important. So that's a core value that Etsy still has. They actually have a much higher proportion of female executives than like a lot of comparable like e-commerce platforms, and so they're really true to they are employee centric, but there is limits. There is just certain. I mean, there is very few people who leave or join a company because they have a breathing room.
Good news, everybody. We got a behavioral economist here. We are not talking about ping pong tables and breathing rooms. And I got a question I really want to ask, but I need us to get into some of the, like I wanted us to make the case, and obviously I want people to go buy a book because it will be of great value to you if you do. But we need to talk a little bit about what is it that creates this engagement? What is it that it really means to put our employees first, to be employee centric? And there's sort of four big things that you talk about in a way.
Yeah,
And I don't know that we'll have time to get to all of them, but we need to start
yeah,
going there. So let's talk about, you hinted at it earlier. The people want to come to work for more than a paycheck. I always say, if you quit paying them, they will stop coming. But that's not the main thing, or not the only thing.
yes,
So like,
yes.
give us some thoughts about this from an economics, hard data kind of perspective
Yeah,
about what is it beyond the paycheck?
yes. So, yeah, I mean, if just for introspection, very few of us get up in the morning and say like, today I'm going to increase the return on invested capital for my company by 1 percentage point. Like, yes,
We're moving the EBITDA line today, baby.
yes, yes. Very, very few people do that. I mean, there might be some, people are very different, but like the majority doesn't. They get out of bed and are really, really motivated by different things than just money. Now, don't get me wrong. If you don't make enough money and you kind of have to worry about making ends meet, that's a killer to productivity as well because you're occupied all the time. So, like, getting up a certain level beyond a certain threshold and have some security is critically important. But once you pass that, no. Now, and we actually know, and here is now the behavioral science that we actually know a lot about what motivates people or what gets them out of bed. And I talk about 4 of those motivators. The first one is purpose. How to actually have purpose that is like have an impact, a meaning that goes beyond solving a problem. And that could obviously differs from what people, some people get, a children's hobby, helping kids or like helping complicated problems to make the world a better place, so to speak, is really important. I mean, I call it shoot for the moon, and maybe then that I wanted to become an astronaut kicks through because, like, the famous example when like President Kennedy said like the only goal NASA has is to bring a man to the moon, and kind of shifted that mission within 7 years, which was a very, very ambitious goal. But it actually invigorated like the whole organization, to the janitor who, in this famous quote says like, I'm not mopping the floor, I'm bringing the man to the moon. That's what got this janitor, I think, out of bed and like, let's do that job. Well, so purpose is one. The second is autonomy, or being empowered. I call it a matter of trust because that's kind of the flip side. People like to have discretion and have flexibility, and and part of it is being trusted. Like if I'm working for you and you say like, Kevin believes in that I can actually do this, uh, and I can now figure out for myself what I want to do and how I want to solve the problem. I think that's really powerful. A lot of people become self-employed just for that, because like being your own boss is a good thing, is very, very powerful. So that's number 2. The third is competence. I call it just right tasks. And it's about kind of having a task that optimally challenges you. It's not boring, and it's not and it's also not overwhelming.
I have to tell you, that is the title of that chapter, and the opening story that you tell is 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 the best metaphor for this I've
Okay.
ever heard.
Okay.
Which is this idea of it's the just right, the just amount, enough but not too much. Is really great. So this idea of just enough, just right tasks, a level of we are motivated by having our ability to show our competence, to grow our competence, and all that. It's excellent. And then there's a
Yeah.
fourth one. So we've got purpose,
Yeah.
autonomy, competence, and
And relatedness, or I call it working together, works. That having, and we can most relate to, if you played on a sports team that really worked well, you know you can achieve a lot. You can outperform kind of the individual qualities of the players if you do it right, and that's true for organization as well. It's very, very motivating to have like the right team and so on. But it's also hard. It's a hard part because humans can be really, really nasty to each other, and can be really toxic. And managing this in the right way and unlocking kind of the power of this working together works is critical, but hard as well.
100%. So you said that one of the intersections of this book is the future of work, and you and I didn't talk about this, but I've written 3 books about that: the long distance leader, long distance teammate, long distance team. And there's a lot of connections between what you talk about here and what we talk about. And I think we're very much in alignment in all of that. And I think that that's great. I'm curious from your perspective. You mentioned technology earlier. How does technology and how does remote work, hybrid work,
Mm.
virtual work, pick it? And I know they're different, but how does what's the connection between those four things: purpose, autonomy, competence, and relatedness? Uh, and how do they connect in this new world of work? And what's the role of technology in all that?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a super interesting question. And I think throughout the book, I want to emphasize and hopefully bring like examples like technology can destroy a lot of those motivators, but also enhance them. So let's think about like autonomy. And and remote work is an interesting one because it kind of taps into two motivators in different ways. It provides the flexibility and the autonomy. And if you really want to optimize that, you should say like, fully remote, people can come whenever they want or not. But another motivator is working together works, being together, having those social interactions that are really powerful. And if you want to maximize that, maybe everybody should come to the office all the time. Now, we're not having,
Tension between those two, right?
yes, there is this tension, but it's also, people, when I talk to executives, they they complain about a lot of things when it comes to remote, and I'm a really big proponent of hybrid if done well. But they, for example, say like, well, there's less water cooler moments, or maybe now there's kombucha tap moment, or whatever it is. And
No, in most of the country, it's water cooler. Let me be clear.
yes, okay.
Maybe not at Columbia, but in most of the world, it's still the water cooler.
We don't have a kombucha tap, but we have a very, very good coffee machine, I have to say. So it's the Nespresso machine moments. Now, I'm not having 40 hours a week Nespresso machine moments, and I'm also being very creative if I have 2 days a week no interaction. In fact, I have 2 days a week where I don't talk to any of my colleagues, and we call it weekend. And the world is not falling apart when we do that. Now, I have trouble sometimes keeping the weekend, because I work a lot. But the idea is we coordinate on 2 days to do nothing. Couldn't we coordinate on like some days we work at home and have then when we actually come in, we might have more coffee moments or like moments that we work together. But you're absolutely right, Kevin, that there is this tension between, flexibility and working together works. Now, when technology can help in other aspects. So when like this just right tasks, for example, when I sometimes tell my leaders is like, because the just right tasks also move, they, once you mastered something, then becomes boring, then you have to, and so I tell leaders, okay, so this is, now it's easy, now it's just for all your team members, you have to figure out what their just right task is, match it to the just right task, and constantly update. That's all you have to do. And they look at me as like, dude,
You're not in
it's
the
like,
real world.
I have like, even if you only have like 5 members on the team, that's hard, not talking about you have like 100 people on it.
Yep.
And then I say, well, yeah, it's hard, but doesn't that sound a little bit like an AI task? Where like if you think Netflix, what Netflix does is figures out, what does Kevin watch? And like, oh, he watches like, I'm now assuming, he watches like business documentaries. And let's show him more business documentaries. And now Kevin is like, after a while, and I watch like nature shows or whatever. But after a while, Kevin gets bored of like, more and more business documentaries and started to watch more dramas. And now, oh, Netflix fixes, oh, Kevin actually he now watches dramas. Let's show him now more dramas. And so on and so forth. Now, that's the same that like technology can do in organizations. And some actually use that. So internal marketplaces that are AI-powered tools where people come, to the platform and say like, I want to learn a new skill. I want to be on another project. Then it matches it with projects, and it learns over time oh, Stefan was now just on a social media platform, social media project in whatever. While I live in the US, one of my in my organization, they want to launch something in Switzerland on social media. Now I happen to know something about Switzerland, and so I'm now on that project. The database now updates. Stefan has a new skill. He actually now knows something about social media. And so the project that it can show me later, and so on and so forth. You kind of get the idea. It's like taking this technology and do exactly what we do with customers, learn how to personalize and so on and so forth. And that enhances the motivation. Surveillance technologies in remote work kills everything about
100%.
trust. And it's really hard. I mean, we've all been in relationships where trust was broken. It's very, very hard to regain. Once the trust relationship is gone, it's really, really difficult to build it up.
And I would even argue, we can say that about any part of our life, but I would even argue that when people feel like they aren't being trusted by management, we'll just use that blanket term, it's even harder for that to come back
Yeah,
because societally we already have a starting point distrust in that group. So like if we've built it and then lost it, we're like, see, this is the way it's always been. That's why we have a
yeah,
movie called Horrible Bosses, and everyone went and watched it, right? Like, so I think it's that is completely 100% true. And I think
yeah,
it's perhaps it's the yoke that we bear as leaders that, man, when we break it in those sorts of ways, it's even harder in many cases to bring
yeah.
it back. And maybe we could argue, although we don't have time to go down this path, that it might be even harder to do at a distance. Although I think we both believe we can manage it, build it, and grow it at a distance. It isn't necessarily obviously easy to do that.
I couldn't agree more with all you just said, Kevin. I think it's because there is this because there is this long history of mistrust between management. It just makes it more extreme if it's broken, and the distance does make it, I do think, harder. I personally do believe strongly that like in-person personal interactions are critically important. Whether we need that 5 days a week, I don't think so.
Different
Uh,
question. Yeah.
but there is something that happens in personal interactions that is not so easy to, at least with the technology that we have today,
Yeah.
to replicate in a virtual or a remote work environment.
There's so many things that I would like to talk to you about that I know that I would like to hope that you would like to talk to me about, but we don't have time to do those things given sort of the normal length of this show. But I do have a couple things I want to ask before we go. First, I guess I will ask this: is there anything I didn't ask or we didn't talk about that you'd really like to? I mean, is there something that we missed that or something last that you like to say before we sort of start to close out our conversation?
No, I mean, I just think, and I think Kevin, we're on the same page here. That like leaders, we kind of need to change kind of their mindset a little bit, and think about the world differently. And I mean, you're right about that. And I think we all try to kind of help each other out. It's hard. It's hard. I don't. It's really, really difficult to motivate, to manage teams. And so the more we can help each other, and I think that's part of what I try to do in the book, like hopefully get like a mindset shift, whether you're the CEO of a 100 plus organization, or the leader of like two people. We still have to learn, and we constantly have to get better, and I think that's really important.
And that's why this show exists. And there's probably both of those two people you just described that are here watching or later listening. A couple things before we go. Um, what do you do, Stefan, for fun?
um so
You just told me you spend half your weekends working, so we got to get out of that for a second. Like, what do you do for fun?
so here is something that I now do often is I make Lego stop motion movies. about work. So
Okay.
so
So, like, is
it's
there a YouTube? Is there somewhere we can see the like? Okay, I've
yes.
never had
y-
anyone tell me that ever.
Yes, you
And I've
can.
asked that question on this show 470. This is the 470th time I've asked
S-
that question.
Yeah. So I have on my webpage. I mean, they're also on YouTube, but I don't think anybody subscribes to my channel, which is fine. But on my webpage, you can look at them. It actually started all with like I was really stressed out. Like I wrote the book, I'm the chair of the division, I teach, I do scholarly work. I was stressed out. And I found I needed like something to ground me. And I found this book in a airport bookstore, how to make a Lego stop motion movie. Now, I have 3 kids and have Lego myself. I have a lot of Legos. So then I started to do those Lego movies with my phone. I still do it with my my old iPhone, and move those little minifigures one after another. Now, it all has to do with work. They have a yoga class, or they have a terrible boss, or it's all related kind of to my work on my book. And so I spend a lot of time thinking about those Lego movies. There is a space shuttle. There is a launch of the book is with the space shuttle.
So if we go to stephanmeier.com, we can see these. Is that what you're saying?
You can go stephanmeier.com, and then at the bottom it says like brick by brick or something videos, and then you can see those.
Okay. Now I have to tell you, you and I were talking before we started about marketing books and all this stuff. And we were having this little inside baseball conversation. Uh, I will bet that the percentage of people that have listened to this show that click on your website will be the highest. I mean, I have no way of proving this. Will be the highest we've ever had. Uh, it's awesome, and I promise that I'm going to go take a look because I haven't done that. So now I'm curious as well, and this is what you knew I was going to ask you, and that is like, what are you reading, or what's something that you've read recently that you might share with us?
Yeah. So a book that I
Other than how
just
to do Lego stop action. Like, I need
I
you to
actually
send me that link. We will put do you know the name of that? We want that in the show notes.
I have it as well. Yeah, you can go. There is actually on my webpage there on the Lego brick by brick. There is a little bit the story behind the Lego movies, and so I tell this story. There's actually a link to the book that I bought at that time.
And we will
So
put that I will do that work for you all, and that will be
okay,
in the show notes as well. But what else are you reading?
okay. So one book that really influenced me like just recently is Power and Progress. It's by Darren Acemoglu. He just won the Nobel Prize in Economics 2 weeks ago or so, actually for something else, because he has a book and work on like why nations fail. But he has this new book on technology, basically, and power and progress. And it's a cautionary tale about technology that, just not every technology will lead to shared prosperity. And he goes through a lot of historic examples, starting, I think, with the agrarian revolution, and then like the industrial revolution, and so on and so forth. And talks about like what leaders have to do, because in the end it's decisions that we have to make. So that's what I found so powerful. But it's a long book, but I personally I think it's worth reading. It's a great book.
We'll have links to both of those. The Lego book. I'm for right now. All I can hold is the Lego book and Power and Progress. We'll have those. We'll also have a link to your book, The Employee Advantage: How Putting Workers First Helps Business Thrive. We've already shown the website. Where else do you want to point people? Anything else you want to say to folks about
No,
connecting with you, or anything before we wrap up?
yeah, no, I think that on LinkedIn, or like I actually have a newsletter where every month I release a new Lego movie. So with the newsletter comes like a new Lego movie. They're short, they're not long movies, so they're like consumable, but hopefully funny.
Um, before we go, everybody, before I say goodbye to Stefan, I need to do what I do for you all every week. I ask you the same question on every episode. I'm going to ask it again today. And it is now what? What action will you take because you were here? Like, what idea did you get? I'm not asking you, like, what did you learn? I'm asking, what will you do with what you learned? And so, obviously, I would like to hope that you go buy a copy of Stefan's book, but that's not really what I'm saying. I'm like, what did you hear here that you could go and want to go apply? I could give you my list. If you're watching, you saw me taking notes, but it's not about my list. It's about your action. And so it's my hope that you will take the time to ask that super powerful, reflective action question. Now what? Because when you do that and take that action, you'll get far more from this time than you would if you don't ask that question. So, Stephan, thank you so much. I told
Thank
you
you
how
so
long we
much,
would
Kevin.
go, and I lied because we went longer, which simply means that I enjoyed this a great deal. Thanks so much for
Yeah,
being
it
here.
was fantastic. Thank you so much, Kevin, for having me.
It was my pleasure. So everybody, if you like this, make sure you come back. If you like this, make sure you invite someone else to come join to watch or listen to this, but also the next one. So, and if you just happen to randomly find this, make sure you subscribe to the Remarkable Leadership Podcast, wherever it is that you listen to your podcast. Hope you'll do that. Hope you'll be back next week, because we'll be back next week with another episode of the Remarkable Leadership Podcast.